Hello and welcome to Religion and Life. I'm your host, Ozzie Ostwald. In today's world, we're concerned about environmental degradation, climate change, and caring for creation in general. Sometimes we don't know exactly how to deal with these challenges in the right way. Luckily, we have people like my guest today, Dr. Kirsten Waldkoenig, who guide us and help us to think about these issues. Dr. Waldkoenig is a philosopher who specializes in environmental ethics. Thank you for joining us today, Kirsten.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it. You are brand new to our university.
True.
In the Department of Philosophy and Religion, so you've been here about 2.5 months, and welcome.
Thank you.
I hope you've liked it here so far. And
it's great to be here.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in the high fall season. Everything is very colorful, and I'm a very mountainous oriented person. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here back in Appalachia.
You are oriented toward the mountains and nature, personally as well as professionally. You rock climb, I think, and I guess this has nothing to do with the mountains, but you also play violin, so you're really talented and an all-around kind of person. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got interested in the field of ethics or philosophy in general, and what brought you here?
Sure. Well, I grew up in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains up in Pennsylvania, near the mid part of the Appalachian Trail, like right about where you hit the place where you could fold it evenly in half.
Oh, cool.
And then my schooling took me away. I lived in Montana and in Oregon. And so it's really great to be back in this Appalachian region where the mountains are the oldest in the world.
That's right. Yeah.
So I have great appreciation for that, and a little bit of environmental ethics wisdom that I've always found to be inspiring is how much we can learn if we're taking seriously the idea that we're just newcomers on this planet.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, and that's something really important to keep in mind. I want to return to that in a little bit. Did the study of philosophy lead you to environmental ethics, or was it the other way around?
It's a great question, and at this point, they're so intertwined, it's hard to
It's
hard to disentangle them. But when I was studying philosophy as an undergraduate student, I had to write a senior thesis, and it was in that assignment I recognized that I wanted to write about something that really mattered. And so when I was honest with myself about what mattered to me, I realized that being outside and caring for our more than human world was something that I thought deserved our philosophical attention. And it sort of grounded me in why we ask big questions and why we want to create meaning in our lives. So the practice of philosophy nicely started to blend into a love of being in the world.
Yeah. The way you phrased that, asking big questions and searching for meaning, that's the way religious studies people talk. So is there some kind of overlap here, I think, with some of our interests?
I think so, yeah.
Well, you know, I'm teaching a new course this semester, and the basic theme is something that some people call eco-spirituality or spiritual ecology, and there seems to be a lot of overlap with the questions you ask in environmental ethics. So maybe you could kind of outline some of the basics of environmental ethics, the types of issues you focus on, or the types of those big questions that you're asking.
Sure. So environmental ethics I think of as a very old discipline, but also a rather young one in philosophy in particular. So people have been thinking about our relationship to the more than human world since time immemorial, but it has only been in the past 50 or so years that professional philosophers, at least in our modern academic university system, have been addressing questions of environment. So we have not only really broad questions about what does it mean to live, and what does it mean to live well, but also more specific questions like what kind of value does the more than human world have? How do we respond to that environment well? How do we respond to questions of climate change or environmental degradation? And that has mainly taken the form of arguments for value, right? Like, how do we weigh different values? But there's also a really big push in the conversations to recognize a broader set of questions, like how can we address other social justice concerns with environmental concerns? And that's actually, to answer your first question, that's actually one of the things that I'm most focused on in my own work is the connection between human social justice issues and then also attending to ecological justice or doing right by our more than human fellows.
You don't see these as separate issues,
No.
then, that the environmental ethics issues, the environmental and ecological issues somehow overlap or intertwine with questions about social and political justice.
That's well put.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the main concerns of people who are engaged in environmental ethics or environmental thinking more broadly is a tendency to think that we have insulated ourselves from our relationship with the more than human world. Maybe we're disconnected in some ways. And so a lot of environmental philosophy is seeking to remediate that, seen as sort of a broken connection.
Right.
So I think when we recognize that human social issues and environmental issues are actually the same set of issues, what we do is place humans back into the environment, at least in a conceptual manner.
You said so much that I want to respond to. I hope I can get back to all of it. But the idea that environmental issues and social justice issues are intertwined, is it the fact that as we experience environmental degradation, that it most radically impacts marginalized communities and groups? Is that part of the economics of climate change and the environmental ethics issues?
Yeah, that's one way to put the wide-ranging effects of environmental degradation.
Okay.
We can also be concerned about the ways that marginalization or social injustice occurs. And often what we see is language or conceptual structures that reinforce simultaneously the marginalization of subordinated groups and the environment as well. So it's not even that they just are issues that touch one another and they happen to exacerbate one another, but the work that I do specifically in the tradition of ecofeminism acknowledges that there are societal forces that actually underlie both of those problems such that they are integrally connected.
Right. All right. That's really well put. And you said that of course, you're not old enough to remember the last 50 years of scholarship.
You're assuming.
But, well, no, I know that. But but I remember, so if you go back 50 years when you said that philosophers started asking these questions, that would put us in the 70s.
Sure.
And I do remember the kind of beginnings of public consciousness about pollution. The skies were dirty. I mean, really dirty. I mean, it seems like we've come a long ways in terms of remediating some of that pollution in our rivers and in our skies. So the work you're doing is paying off, I think. We still have a lot of problems left, of course.
Yeah.
But I was interested in one of the things you said that environmental ethicists are interested in doing, and that is reintegrating human life into the environment or into the natural realm. And we have really kind of separated ourselves with urbanization and even technologies that make it more comfortable to stay inside rather than being out in the woods. So how do we go about reintroducing ourselves to the natural world and appreciating it more?
Yeah. It's a tough question. I think there are multiple things that we can address here. One of them is the way that we talk about nature. We have a lot of opportunity to improve, not only to be more accurate about ecological reality and our place in it, but also to be sensitive to the ways that our language might be reproducing this separation. So, for instance, the ideas that human beings are simply more important than anything else on the planet, right? We might want to stop ourselves in statements like that and ask, are we really more important, or is there some way that we can recognize a multiplicity of significance, not just in human beings, but also in other species or in other parts of our environment, the
Right.
non-living factors, right? So we can be attentive in that way. But another easy way that we can remind ourselves is just to go out and experience the world. There has long been a debate in environmental ethics about the question of whether nature is somewhere out there beyond the human sphere, or whether it's more accurate to say that this is all nature in a way, and we as humans are just one manifestation or one version of nature doing its thing.
Right.
And so if we recognize that view, and we're not so worried that nature is always sort of out there, reproducing perhaps a kind of cognitive separation between us and the natural world, then we realize that we can just be us and live our lives and be maybe out of doors. It makes it easier for us to remember, but we can have closer contact with the world that is not just human artifact.
Yeah, I sure try.
Yeah.
And one of the things in religious studies, when we're studying humans and the more than human environment, as you put it, and I want to come back to that, is that it seems to me that Asian traditions and indigenous traditions have done and do a better job of seeing the natural world as a unity, including humans and non-human life. And Abrahamic or Western traditions have a more dualistic view that elevates the status of humans over the rest of the world. Is that something that comes up in the philosophical discussions as well?
Absolutely.
No.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Abrahamic traditions, because I'm actually quite interested in the connection between Martin Buber, a Jewish philosopher. He was raised in the Hasidic tradition of Judaism, and his philosophy of relation is very relevant to the way that I think we can best articulate our relationship to the more than human world. And the way that he talks about the ethical responsibility that we have to another with whom we are in relation and with whom we share the world is so similar to the way that indigenous peoples, especially of North America, speak about their covenants with more than human others.
This is the I-thou relationship. And you use the word covenant, which is, of course, a word that's often used in religious language. So, we have to recover that idea of being in covenant with the rest of the non-human world. So, but we're kind of cursed with this anthropocentric view.
It's a legacy we have to.
It is a legacy, and maybe a patriarchal view might play in as well. But that's something that we can remind ourselves that we probably need to let go of that, or we're going to ruin our home. So when you talk about the more than human environment, I would assume this is animals, plants, vegetation, trees. What about inanimate objects, the whole thing?
So, yes.
All right, so talk a little bit about how we establish covenants with those different aspects of the more than human world, and what our responsibilities are toward those parts of the non-human world.
Oh, that's a huge question.
I know. I know it's a lot.
Well, I think one thing that can be learned from indigenous traditions is that they have long-standing knowledge of specific places where they have stories and ceremonies that remind them of how to carry out those covenants. So certainly it's not necessarily transportable, that knowledge, to those who are non-indigenous, right, or who come from a tradition in the legacy, say, of anthropocentrism and don't already have that covenant established. So that's kind of the kicker question that you've just asked.
Right.
I mean, I think part of what we might do to reestablish or to establish in the first place some kind of better relation is first to recognize that the more than human world is something to engage with on a really personal level, as if I was sitting with a tree or
Right.
a rock or whoever a non-human is. I mean, the way that we relate to each other as human beings is so automatic for us, and what we can do is to reorient ourselves toward more than human others as the same way that we orient ourselves to each other as in relationship.
Yeah.
So
And maybe we have more ease doing this with animals or domesticated animals
Perhaps.
at least than with plant life and inanimate objects. But we need to broaden out our understanding of what we're in covenant with. And I guess it's for the good of humanity to recognize that this is a whole ecosystem, right? And we can't exist alone.
Yes.
So to bring these kinds of issues down to a religious question that I'm familiar with in my own tradition in Christianity, and I suppose in Judaism too, the creation stories have two statements that theologians talk about, and one of them is God telling Adam and Eve to subdue the world and to be fruitful and multiply. And the other is the command to take care of creation. So it's kind of, on the one hand, there's this assignment of utilitarian value to creation, and on the other hand, there's this recognition that nature has intrinsic value in and of itself, and that it's part of our world. That's a battle in environmental ethics, right? To recognize the intrinsic value of nature, and how do we get further along the way in doing that?
Absolutely. So that right now in environmental ethics, there are a number of debates live about this very question because our political realm usually works with the language of instrumentality and utility.
Yeah.
So we want to make decisions that are, fiscally responsible and responsible with the, perhaps limited resources that our governing bodies have. But what happens there is maybe an overemphasis upon instrumentalizing the more than human world itself, rather than recognizing a kind of intrinsic value where maybe the more than human other can address us as someone in conversation, where we recognize that, they have their own project and their own being going on that we should be better about responding to.
Yeah.
So environmental ethics, I think, has done a good job of advancing the language of intrinsic value, but many environmental philosophers are also dissatisfied with intrinsic value. I mean, we can look around and see that language from the 1970s onward, and it's still alive and well, but some people are disillusioned with it as well because climate change is only intensifying and we see only more degradation around us. So maybe the worry is that the language of intrinsic value hasn't caught
on. It doesn't go far enough. And maybe that's where
doesn't speak to decision makers.
Okay, well then you lost me there, because I was going to say that with eco-spirituality they like to use sacred language and assign the natural world or the more than human world sacred value, which to me is a little different from intrinsic value, and I don't know if they work against each other or not. But probably trying to assign sacred language to the environment is not going to influence policymakers either.
Yeah, I think the worry is that our society is fragmented, right, into theists and non-theists, or secular society,
right,
spiritual society, and maybe the language of intrinsic value is broad enough that it captures many people's approaches to ethics, but perhaps I think the worry is that the term sacred is inaccessible. I mean, even if we talk about indigenous traditions who most firmly believe in the sacred, I mean, that's not it's not a transportable idea. It's not something that those of non-indigenous heritage are able to participate
Yeah.
in, right?
Well, you mentioned earlier the idea of sacred spaces, and I think that's something that's universal in all religions,
Yeah.
and maybe we can tap into that. I've got a couple of images here that might stimulate some thought. Of course, this is the tree of life, which is a kind of universal symbol that I put in there because I like it, and most religions have some sort of symbolic representation of this image. And the second slide I have, I should have brought this up earlier when you were talking about some of the issues that are important to environmental ethics, because you've mentioned all of them, right? Anthropocentrism, intrinsic value, environmental virtue ethics, and so forth. So it's just a nice little graph. But the next image is the one I really wanted to pull up, because this is something that's timely and current. Why do I have owls on the screen here? I just read an article that you wrote, and help me fill in the back story here, but apparently the owl on the right is the spotted owl, native to the Northwest. The owl on the left is a barred owl. They look pretty similar to me, but they're cousins, I think. What has happened is that because of logging and other practices, the habitat has been reduced for the spotted owl. Is that correct?
Yes.
And now the barred owl is moving into that territory. And this is where the plot thickens.
Yes.
So, how is the Wildlife Commission, or what agency?
It's U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife. What is the solution that they've come up with?
Yeah, recently the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has adopted what they call the Final Barred Owl Management Program, FBOM for short. And
Yeah, I got it. Okay.
yeah, that is a proposal that was actually, it originated in some of the state fish and wildlife services of the Pacific Northwest. And they propose that in order to halt the decline of the spotted owl, or in other language, to save the spotted owl, that,
which is a protected species or endangered species, I think.
and an indicator species.
Okay,
So
yeah.
a really key species to understanding the health of the ecosystem of the Pacific Northwest, forested Pacific Northwest. The barred owl is pitted against the spotted owl as the reason for the spotted owl's decline, because the spotted owl is a really particular predator, and they don't multiply very quickly. Their reproduction rate is quite low, and they're also kind of a shy creature. But the barred owl is a lot more opportunistic, and so has a much wider range of
Yeah, you can see it in his
things that
face,
they'll
right?
eat. Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right.
just ready, very
Yeah, it's ready to go.
very adaptive. And
Yeah.
so the F-bombs
Yeah.
is suggesting that our federal agencies put money toward lethal removal of barred owls.
Killing them.
Yeah, what this
Yeah.
looks like is the state would provide training, but also incentive for individual hunters to go out and shoot one by one barred owls. I mean, this just sounds very difficult to me. But also, the barred owl here is then losing almost 500,000 of their population in the Pacific Northwest over the next 30 years is the proposal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds Orwellian almost. It's just, or draconian or whatever. It's you got to feel badly for the barred owl.
Yeah.
Now, what complicates this is that the whole situation is human cause, right? Because it's a human invasion into the habitat that allowed the barred owl to come in. So I think in your article you're suggesting that we think about this a little differently, right? So say a little more about changing our orientation to think about this controversy a little bit
Sure.
differently.
Yeah, so the FBOM's Final Barred Owl Management Strategy, it suggests that the reason why the spotted owl is declining is because of the barred owl. So it calls the barred owl invasive and says the ways that we have to manage the decline of the spotted owl is all dealing with the barred owl population. But what that doesn't acknowledge is, as you mentioned, some of the root causes of the decline of the spotted owl, such as habitat loss. I mean, the spotted owl needs dense old growth forest, and that is disappearing at an alarming rate in the Pacific Northwest. Climate change, anthropogenic climate change, has also had a huge effect on their ability to survive in these forests. As the forest warms, there's speculation that their decline is also due to these effects that ripple through the forest. So when F-bombs or anyone talking about this issue says that the barred owl needs to be managed, it seems to me that we're missing the role of human influence here. And maybe we should be thinking more seriously about the ways that we can prevent habitat fragmentation and deforestation to protect the spotted owl.
Are you making any headway in making that argument?
It's a really controversial issue.
Yeah.
But because what we might lose in losing the spotted owl is also the face of the Pacific Northwest forests.
Right.
I mean, historically, conservation efforts have been surrounding the spotted owl because the spotted owl is such an important species in those Pacific Northwest forests. So what major tool we have to prevent deforestation and the destruction of those old growth forests is actually the spotted owl being an endangered species.
Yeah, so this gets back to the anthropocentrism. It's a human-caused problem, and here, to get beyond that, you're suggesting that we change our behaviors, but nobody wants to change their behaviors because there's still this tendency to put human needs first. So we have a long ways to go. Yeah, the work brings home to me the necessity, the idea that this is no longer a choice for the future of humanity. It's a necessity that we begin to think about our relationship to the non-human world in more nuanced ways and more subtle ways. And I think the work you're doing is very important in that.
Thank you. Allow me to also say, I think, I have personal affinity with the barred owl. I used to work at a raptor center with birds that were injured, and so I actually had barred owls on my arm and, fed them mice. And that doesn't mean to say that, I don't mean to say that I'm privileging them over the spotted owl. I love the spotted owl as well, having lived in the Pacific Northwest. It's a very important species, and I hate to see either of them be the targets of.
We're rooting for both of them.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, we are.
All right. You've been a wonderful guest.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your insights with us, and I know your work's important, and I'm anxious to see where it goes from here.
Well, thanks for your support. And
thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, that's it for Religion and Life for this week. I hope you'll join us again next week. And until then, this is Ozzie Ostwald.